Aloha and welcome to How Families Support Their Children and Teens During COVID-19. I'm very happy to welcome Chaminade's Masters of Science Counseling Psychology program, Marriage and Family Therapy graduate clinical students who will be leading you in today's event. This event is sponsored by the BDK Bukyo Dendo Kyokai Fujitani Interfaith Program at Chaminade University of Honolulu, which brings together the Buddhist community with other religious communities in Hawaii to promote interfaith dialogue and provide opportunities for understanding and action for peace and justice in our community. So let us begin. I'd like to introduce Betsy Gunderson, the Associate Superintendent of Hawaii Catholic Schools, for a little bit about Hawaii Catholic Schools and to lead us in our opening invocation. Thank you.
Last August. My memory of those days prior to opening was Llewellyn and I checked in with all the principals. I mean, the anxiety of going to school face to face was huge. Absolutely huge. And basically our job was to kind of listen, to counsel, very much like many of you do, to counsel and listen and just be with them in that anxiety. As it turned out, all the way through Easter break, we only had about 7 cases altogether. None were school spread. All were from families. They followed their protocols. They managed, some of the schools offered online learning. Some did face-to-face, some did both. And I think the heroes in all of this, I mean, their leadership are heroes, but the heroes to me in all of this have been the teachers and what they have borne in their quick shift to new ways of teaching. It's almost like being a new teacher again and recreating everything all over again. And then to do it for you know, kids in their classroom without being able to touch them or hold them or hug them. And so it's been quite the challenge. There are blessings though. The blessing is that we met quite often in roundtable experiences with all the principals. They could phone in even from Kauai and Maui and, you know, and Hawaii Island. And so we've had some more connectivity in one sense by the pandemic, but you know, as we move out of it, I think we need to really remember how important those relationships are, and the children and the, you know, the teachers, and of course their parents as well, for supporting our families. Our families were excellent in terms of following protocols. If they were fighting it, we would not have been as successful as we had been. Now, high schools and middle schools a little different. You know, they've had to go 50% at a time, take turns going into school. And some of them are thinking about opening up in September in that same manner. They just don't know. And that's the other piece of the anxiety, is just the not knowing. So, you know, we want to pray for all of them and all of the teachers and all of the students and all the support that everyone in this community has given to each other, you know, in this time. So I'd like to begin with a prayer in the name of the Father, the Son, Holy Spirit. Amen. Pause for a minute and think about all those heroes in your life that have mentored and helped and loved in all the ways that they knew possible, those who are anxious in this time, who have reached out in kindness, who have reached out with support. Think of them and think of the children that have been placed in our care, whether they're big kids in college or whether they're little kids in preschool. They're still under our care and guidance and supervision. We pray this for them. Heavenly Father, we praise you and we bless you for guiding us and giving us strength during this challenging time. We ask that you continue to show the way as we as we move forward to reach out in all the ways possible to support those children that are in our care. We pray for their families, and we pray especially for the teachers and administrators in all of our schools who have had to rise to the occasion. Please continue to bless them with your wisdom and above all energy, the energy of the Holy Spirit. We thank you and we praise you in your name. Amen. In the name of the Father, the Son, Holy Spirit. Amen.
Mahalo, Betsy, for the beautiful prayer and for letting us know, what's been happening in the Catholic schools. I'd like to introduce now the wonderful assistant professor that brought together all of these graduate clinical students. And that's Dr. Blendine Hawkins, who's an assistant professor at Chaminade University, a licensed marriage and family therapist, clinical fellow, and an AAMFT approved supervisor with the American Association for Marriage and Family Therapy. She enjoys conducting research on intercultural, couple dynamics, transnational and families of color experiences, parent-child attachment in moderating the effects of trauma, and much, much more. We're so very happy to have Dr. Hawkins with us at Chaminade University, and really excited to have her students with us today. So, Dr. Blendine.
Hello there. Hello, everybody. Please just call me Blondine. I'm so glad to be here. Thank you all for coming to the session. So I'm going to be the moderator for today. And I have my wonderful students here, and they're clinical graduate students, and they're all working within the marriage and family therapy track. And that means they're being trained to work with families and being trained specifically to understand the dynamics between parents and children. So I know all of us are concerned about how families support children and teens during the pandemic. And today you'll hear things that don't just work for within the pandemic, but post-pandemic as well, because you'll always have technology, you'll always have kids at home, you'll always have kids stressed and wondering about, the next steps in terms of college and such. So all these things are pertinent for all families. As you'll see in this, in your program, we're covering a variety of topics and age groups as well. And I think we'll have probably lively conversations about that. Let me introduce my brilliant master's clinical students that will be speaking today. I'm going to read a little bit of their bio. I know that you probably have seen some of that, but I just wanted to, as I'm speaking, as I'm talking about them, maybe they can put up their hands so you know who I'm talking about. But we have first Shannan Yamamoto. She's a graduate student, clinical intern, and she was born and raised in Honolulu, Hawaii. She currently works with adolescent girls aged 13 to 17, providing emotion-focused therapy and with an integration of cognitive behavioral techniques as well. Shannan aspires to continue her work in the field of marriage and family therapy, as well as continue to study and research the dynamics of interpersonal relationships. And that's Shannan. All right. Yeah. Next, we have Tanye Moriwaki. She is a graduate student and clinical intern as well. And she hails from Mililani, Hawaii. And she works with college students, providing mental health resources and assistance. She works within the college population. She aspires to teach at a collegiate level and one day start her own practice working with couples, which is very close to my heart. Yes, yay, Tanye. All right, that's Tanye. And next we have Lawrence Kim. He is a graduate student and a clinical intern as well. He hails from Honolulu, Hawaii. Lawrence works with adults who have histories with severe mental illnesses and substance abuse. He leads psychoeducational groups and assists with the reintegration into the larger community. Very important work there. Law aspires to work with as a couples therapist, specifically with the young adult population. Much needed. That's Law. All right. And then we have Bailey. She is a graduate student and a clinical intern as well. She hails from Kailua. She works with elementary and middle school students, specifically those who have diagnoses such as ADHD and anxiety. How needed. She aspires to be a marriage and family therapist and focusing on working with the Native Hawaiian population and community and families. Wonderful. We're so glad, Bailey. Thank you for being here as well. So as you can see, we have a variety of expertise already in this group. And so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and then they're going to take over from there. I'm here the whole time, so if you need me, let me know. All right. Take it away, Bailey.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here. I will be talking about school-age children today, specifically from the ages of about 3 to 13, and then a little bit of focus on ADHD and anxiety as well. So I'm going to be talking about ages 3 to 13 because I think around the age of 3, preschool age, is when we generally see children beginning school and starting that journey as an individual. And then 13 is around the time that you graduate from 8th grade. So keep in mind that the things that I'm talking about, I have such a large span of time that I'm going to be discussing. So I'll try to differentiate between different age groups. But please keep in mind that I'm talking about 10 years difference. So I'm going to talk about competency of skills and tasks, a sense of pride, social interaction, changes in self-concept, and common fears and anxieties for this age group. So when we talk about the competency of skills and tasks, this is really when we start to discover our interests. We learn our strengths and weaknesses, and we begin to develop our personality. So for skills and tasks, we start to talk about, I know that I'm good at this. I may not be so good at something else. And as we grow and learn, the skills and the tasks that we start to work on become a lot more difficult, and children learn to adapt and adjust to this new information that's being learned. Throughout this time, there's a lot of brain changes that happen. And so you begin to retain more and have a deeper memory development, which really helps when you're learning new things and trying to develop who you are and your sense of self. For the development of pride, this is where we can emphasize a mastery-oriented approach. In this field, a mastery-oriented approach focuses on individual development rather than comparing yourself to others. So for school-age children, this is extremely important because your focus will be primarily on their hard work and their effort in a certain task, rather than comparing themselves to their peers. And so we can focus on their behavior and their effort and how that is a mastery in and of itself. For social interaction, this happens throughout the entire span of your life, really. But for school-age children, this is extremely important because this is where you really begin to learn about group work and learning how to collaborate with people and share information. And this is really how you learn to problem solve in life. So social interaction for this age group is extremely important. And especially when we're looking at kids who are in middle school, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, this is where they really start to rely on their friends a lot more for a deeper understanding of what they're going through in life, a deeper understanding of themselves, and also for emotional support. So for changes in self-concept, we use a term called self-concept, and it's generally thought of as our individual perceptions of our own behavior, our own abilities, and our unique characteristics. And this really discusses how we paint a picture, a mental picture of ourselves and who we believe we are as a person. So we can identify in the school-age children when they say things like, I am a helpful friend, or I am a good sister, other things like that, who they really see themselves as, and learning about similarities between themselves and differences between themselves and their peers. And this happens through what clothes they wear, what kind of music they listen to, what they watch on TV, and different age groups throughout this period compare themselves differently, but generally that's kind of what we're looking at. So for common fears and anxieties, school-age children will worry about different things at different points in time. So for ages about 5 to 7, actually 3 to 7, I would say more so, this really focuses on anxiety of being separated from your mother, coming to school and not being around your family as much. And from ages 11 to 13 or middle school, there have a variety of fears and anxieties at this time, including certain aspects of school. It could be a certain subject, fear of rejection from your peers, bullying, social events that could be happening, school dances, and also what's happening in the media greatly influences kids in the middle school time. So when we think about how COVID really started and how we shut down so abruptly, a lot of times these middle schoolers were taking in what was happening through the media. And, so we can think about how that might have affected them during this time. Okay, so we have a few questions for you guys. Actually, one question and then one kind of recap question. Dr. Hawkins?
Yes. We're going to use this program called Slido, and it's going to be challenging for some and exciting for others. It's technology. I'm going to share my screen in terms of how to get to it. But what you're going to do is you're either going to use your phone and the QR code that's going to be projected, or you're going to just follow the link and use the hashtag, and then you're going to type in your answer. I know, so it's a little bit of a few steps, but we'll get through this together. All right. Okay. So here's the question. Oh, yep. And if you had your phone with you, if you wanted to hold it up to that Slido, if not, this is the site you would go to. Okay. And I can put that in the chat box as well. We'll give everyone a minute or two. As you go to this site, as you put in this hashtag and put in the words, right? The words you would use to describe your effective coping strategy, you'll see it show up here. So we'll all together create a list of things in a word cloud together. All right. Please unmute and ask me questions if you're having trouble.
Okay, I'm so excited to see all of these awesome coping strategies that you guys use. Meditating is huge. I definitely use meditation when I'm stressed out. Reading for sure. Exercise is great. I think myself and some of my peers are actually going to talk about some of these things. So this is great that you guys already use these coping strategies during stressful times. And I think probably this past year, we've realized actually how important a lot of these things are. Not being able to see a lot of people and socially interact, really reflecting in on yourself and what are the things that you do to help yourself feel better during difficult times. So as these are kind of popping up here, I kind of want to just throw out another little question that you can use a reaction I think it's available on if you look at the chat section, there should be little emojis on the bottom, and you can give a thumbs up or a yes or no. My question is, when you look at your own coping strategies, for those of you who have children, how many of you recognize that your children use some of these same coping strategies themselves when they feel stressed out or overwhelmed? I'm going to talk a little bit about how important this is and how important our coping strategies are, and how a lot of times, even though we may not realize, our children are reflecting some of these same kinds of behaviors.
Bailey, there were 3 thumbs up and 1 yes.
Okay, awesome. I know, sorry, I'm like trying to scroll and see. I can't see everybody, but yeah, so a lot of times when you see, your children reacting to a difficult situation, they might reflect some of the same behaviors as you. And so doing things such as meditating, deep breathing, and all of those kinds of things are really effective coping strategies and are really helpful and are very important for adults as well as children. And when you're ready, Dr. Hawkins, we can go back. Okay, so why do I ask you these questions? This is super important when we talk about social competency. And so some of the things that I'm going to discuss are the relationships with peers and parents, emotional self-regulation, emotional self-efficacy, coping strategies, and individual rights. So the relationship that children have with their peers and their parents are extremely important during school age time, especially having warm parental relationships and supportive adults. This can be their parents, their guardian, really anybody in their life. And this helps them to foster resiliency, especially during difficult times. So building that relationship with your child and having open discussions about things such as positive social skills and, putting yourself in others' shoes and looking at another person's perspective during a situation or a problem really helps them to evolve in their problem solving. And this is when modeling and observation become extremely important, because as they watch you and observe you and how you react to certain situations, they really start to model the things that you're doing as well. So emotional self-regulation is extremely important because this is when children begin to understand emotions more clearly. And we see them develop more personal responsibility and empathy during problem solving. And this is when it's extremely important for them because they learn how to use words to explain their emotions and to explain how they're feeling and what's happening. And so we start, in the preschool age, really kind of fostering that kind of conversation and talking through these emotions. And so the more that we do this, the easier it is for them to explain what's happening and identify how they're feeling. And these developments and deeper understanding of these emotions is really developed through their social interactions. And the more they socialize, the more problems that could arise, and the more they have to face these issues and utilize their coping skills. So emotional self-efficacy in this field refers to how well a child can adjust to or cope in different situations. And during this period in school-age children, they're really learning how to adjust and cope during difficult and hard situations. And so this is when, we can ask ourselves, we can look at our children and we can ask ourselves, do they have the tools needed to overcome anger and sadness? And as a child, you really reflect on the idea of, am I deserving of joy and happiness? And can I express those emotions? And this is important because this is when our coping strategies really start to affect how we see ourselves emotionally and and how our personality starts to develop as well. So during this time, they start to use strategic thinking. And this is when they start planning for the future. They start to, problem solve and things like that. And so their coping strategies really start to evolve and develop more greatly. And this can happen through self-monitoring and self-regulation, and through talking through their problems with the adults that they have in their life, specifically their parents, and also with their peers at school and through their social interactions. And this is when we see, coaching on problem solving, especially for preschool age children, is really important. And, talking about the acceptance of emotions. And I understand that you're upset, and it's okay to be upset. And what are the things that we can change, and what are the things that we cannot change? During school age time, it's extremely important for them to begin to really understand their individual rights, both for themselves and for other people. And during different stages, the younger you are, it's going to be different when you understand your individual rights as you get older. So when you're younger, this might look like, beginning to understand that not everybody has to play with you if they don't want to. Especially during preschool, kindergarten, first grade. This is when we really start to see this. I worked in kindergarten for about 3 years, and we see a lot of this. They tattletale on their friends because their friends don't want to play with them. And this is when we really start to explain, it's okay that they don't want to play with you. You can find someone else to play with, or you can play by yourself. And I am not going to make them play with you. It's their right to not want to play with you, or, not have to play with you. And maybe tomorrow they will, but today they don't want to, and it's okay. And as you get older, in middle school, which is where I'm really focusing right now, the older kids start to challenge authority, right? What are my rights as a middle schooler? And so, telling them, okay, something as simple as taking out a piece, they might challenge you. Why? I don't want to. And this is understanding that they're develop their rights and see that they don't always have to do something that somebody else tells them to. So it's kind of like funny because it backfires. You teach them this in preschool, and then by the time they're in middle school, they realize they don't have to do anything that anybody says. Okay, Dr. Hawkins. So I just threw this statistic in here because I thought it was really important to reflect on how much the pandemic has really affected school age children. So there was a 24% increase in mental health related emergency room visits for elementary age children since March 2020. And this study was taken a couple months ago, so it could be even more now. So even though you might not hear anything from your children, they may not express through words. They may have a hard time, really identifying these emotions, but just know that there is an increase in and a need for mental health related identification. So COVID impacts on social competence. So we're going to look at the reduction in academic performance and the ability to cope with stress, why this happens, the effects of masks on SEL, which is social emotional learning, and why is this so important right now. So masks are, as we all know, a huge part of daily life. It is now a normal thing for all of us. And when we're looking at the preschool years, this is really important because there's a huge emphasis on the development of emotional intelligence. For those of you who don't know, emotional intelligence is known as the ability to identify and manage your own emotions, as well as the emotions of others. So from between the ages of about 3 to 5 years, this is where we really start to learn emotions, feelings, and what these really mean. And we learn this through visual observation. And as you all know, masks inhibit the ability to see a person's full emotional state, especially when you're younger and you're playing with someone. And this is really when you learn through doing. So if I hurt someone's feelings, what does that look like? Or if you hurt my feelings, what does that look like? And during the preschool years, a lot of teachers try to emphasize, okay, if I throw a block at my friend is crying, look at him, he's sad. You made him really upset because you did that. How does it feel? And with a mask on, you really can't see their full face. And as adults, we might not think very much about this, but when you're younger, if you can't see their full emotional state, do they really fully understand then what it looks like for someone to be sad, hurt, angry, happy, all of those things? So according to Yale Medicine, prior to the pandemic, emotional intelligence and social emotional learning started to become very popular. And through studies, it was found that higher emotional intelligence and the ability to manage your emotions well was positively correlated with better academic performance. And also they found that there was less disciplinary problems in children who were highly emotionally intelligent. And so this is important right now because really the emotional state of the entire world is at bay. And, these things we don't really think about, they might not matter until they finally do. And this was a point in time where it really mattered for everybody. And so currently everyone pretty much in the world is highly anxious, highly emotional, and trying to find ways to cope. Everybody is pretty much triggered right now, and everyone wants to feel better and learn how to cope and get through this. So I'm going to talk a little bit about, if you have children right now, what can you do at home? And so it's very important that you begin to model the behavior that you want your child to do. So some things I'm going to talk about are questions to ask at bedtime, sportscasting, and using an emotional thermometer. So some effective coping strategies, you guys all pretty much displayed effective coping strategies through our little poll that we did there. And that can include breathing deeply or taking a moment to just walk away from the situation, and definitely talking about and identifying feelings. So that is, I'm going to talk about sportscasting right now. And so sportscasting is really talking about and identifying your feelings out loud for your children. So, if you start to get upset and something happens, and you can just look at them and say, you know what, I just got so upset right now. I thought we were going to be late for school, and I started to feel anxious, and you're really talking through your internal coping process and identifying that it's okay to be upset, and this is what I'm going to do about it, and so that they can better understand how to cope as well. So questions asked at bedtime are really great, especially right now, because it helps to reflect on your child's day. It helps to talk about the emotions and things that may have happened and that they're still trying to understand. And it also sets up a bedtime routine, which is important for school-age children. And then it builds a relationship and a bonding experience with you and your child, and it creates a safe space to discuss their problems, to discuss their successes, and different things that they may be feeling. So some great questions to ask at bedtime could be, what happened today that made you feel brave? How was your day? What is something you learned today? And what made you happy today? What would you have changed about today? You can actually go online and Google, questions to ask my child before bedtime. And there's a whole list of them. And this is a great way to set up bedtime routine and really build that relationship. On the right-hand side, you're going to see what's called the emotion thermometer. And so it has a scale of 1 through 5. It identifies the names of all the emotions, and then it puts a face to all of these emotions. And this helps to identify the feelings and create an open discussion about why those feelings are occurring. And so your child, if they're not able to express exactly how they're feeling, they can point to the face or the number, or they can say the color. And you can say, okay, so you're at a 3, so you're feeling frustrated right now and confused. And you can really talk through these problems and help them put an expression and name so they can understand. And especially during the preschool ages, and especially right now with, as we talked about the masks, this emotion thermometer is going to be extremely helpful. Okay, so we're going to jump now. We're going to switch gears a little bit and talk about ADHD and anxiety. And something I want to emphasize is that a lot of these things that I'm talking about, I'm going to talk about some different strategies and behaviors. But if your child does not have a diagnosis, or you don't work with kids who have ADHD and anxiety, it doesn't mean you won't also see some of these things and they won't be prevalent, especially because of the pandemic. and how stress might have, you know, brought about some of these behaviors. And I'm also going to emphasize that some of these things that I talk about will be different or age appropriate for certain age groups. So for ADHD, what does that look like? So ADHD oftentimes look like the inability to focus for long periods of time. It can look like impulsivity, poor organizational skills, excessive talking, feelings of restlessness, and also interrupting or intruding on others. I would like to point out that if you have a child between the ages of 3 and about 5, a lot of these behaviors are age appropriate. So it doesn't mean that your child, you know, might have this diagnosis. It just means that they're kind of learning how to not interrupt others and focus for longer periods of time as well. So anxiety will look like excessive worry about topics or events. It can look like restlessness or edginess, irritability, and a difficulty sleeping, and definitely an inability to concentrate. So when we look at ADHD and anxiety next to each other, some of these behaviors look the same, especially not having the ability to concentrate for long periods of time, feeling restless and on edge. And so how does this affect a child's academics? So a lot of times what happens is you lose chunks of time or information due to your inability to focus. And so for children with anxiety, this is because they're so worried and anxious about whatever they're thinking about, their soccer game after school or their parent who is sick at home, that they're sitting in class and they're staring at you and you're lecturing, but they're elsewhere. They're worried about something completely different. And so for behavior issues that they might have in school, this could be due to their irritability, their impulsiveness, their excessive talking, and their interrupting. And this can be especially difficult when you try to complete your schoolwork at home. For those of you who still have kids at home, even for part of the week, not having a set schedule to follow, you know, with bells and somebody telling you where to go and when, and not having a specific workspace or the same accommodations. Children with ADHD and anxiety tend to have some accommodations, more break times and those kinds of things. Having to sit in front of a computer for a long period of time. I know that I don't like sitting in front of a computer for a long period of time. Any child, even without a diagnosis, probably hates sitting in front of the computer for a long period of time. And it's especially hard for children with ADHD and anxiety. And so how does this affect returning to school? I am noticing that on Zoom, you can literally mute someone. So your control over the classroom setting is a lot more controlled and it's easier to handle, because if somebody is talking out of turn, I can easily just hit the mute button and I can make it so you cannot unmute yourself, you know, so I can get through what I'm trying to say, or I can say, okay, you know, you need to wait your turn, and I can unmute somebody specific to answer or call on someone specific. And what's happening is when you return to school, you're not used to, it's been about a year, and it's been over a year, right? For some of these kids who have been at home. So when you're coming back and you've been at home and you've been having that discussion in front of the Zoom camera, but nobody can hear you, now you're talking out loud in the whole classroom setting. And you might have been eating all day randomly whenever you felt like it, eating a snack. You might have been sitting with your legs crossed in your chair. And so now that you're at school, a lot of these things, it doesn't matter if you have ADHD or anxiety. Kids in general are just coming back and they're not used to, you know, waiting until a specific snack time to eat, waiting their turn, raising their hand, sitting nicely in their chair. A lot of these behaviors have been lost, as you can imagine, because of this. And all of these things combined with not having socialized in over a year, these children are very, very excited, and they should be. They haven't seen their peers in a really long time. And so coming back, their excitement is very heightened and it's more extreme for everyone. And it's a little bit hard to control. And it's important that we be understanding, but also to remind them that, you know, we need to remember how we should be behaving at school. Okay, so what can we do at home? Some things we can do are create checklists, right? Like, okay, first thing you're gonna do this morning is drink your glass of milk, brush your teeth, and you have a whole checklist for these children using a planner. So what I found is that you can easily look up a generalized planner online, print a piece of paper, put it into a sheet protector, and use dry erase markers. And they can just every day write down the things that they're supposed to be doing, the homework, their assignments, all of those things. Brain breaks, which can be going outside for a little bit or taking a little pause in your work. One of my peers is going to talk more about this later, and I'm super excited for that, so I won't really dive in. The check-ins that I talked about for questions at bedtime, and your check-in can be in the morning also. As soon as your child wakes up, it can really be at any time. And then diet and exercise, especially for children with ADHD and anxiety. This is really, really important. There's been a huge lack of exercise, obviously, because they're at home sitting and not running around and playing with their friends as much. And their diet is also going to be different because they're not eating their school lunch. They're not eating, some of them have, school breakfast and all of those things. So simple things such as letting your child run around before school starts or letting your child ride their bike to school can really help them throughout the day. Okay, so thank you so much for listening. Here's 3 articles that I thought were really great that you can look into or take a screenshot of and read more about it. I don't have time to dive into everything, but this is where I found a lot of great information. So next, I'm going to introduce you to my dear colleague, Shannan. She's amazing. She's going to be talking about mental health and stress management for students. And I'm super excited. Shannan, take it away.
Thank you, Bailey. Hi, everyone. Hope everyone is having a nice Saturday morning. So as Bailey mentioned, I will be discussing mental health and stress management. So what I've found through working in a school setting with middle school to high school students is that mental health and managing stress really boils down to time management with regard to getting enough sleep, healthy eating habits, a healthy social life, a good amount of physical activity, and allotting time and space for studying. In working with students, I've also found that parent-child relationships are so important and influential, not only in terms of growth, but also in terms of academic performance. Okay, so mental health for students. According to the World Health Organization, mental health is defined as a state of well-being in which every individual realizes his or her own potential, can cope with the normal stresses of life, can work productively and fruitfully, and is able to make a contribution to his or her community. So mental health is more than just an absence of mental illness. It also involves the physical, mental, and social aspects of life. General factors that are associated with poor mental health, especially for students, include stress, social exclusion, an unhealthy lifestyle, and poor physical health, among other things. And research does show a clear connection between mental health and academic performance. Mental health can affect a student's energy level, concentration, dependability, motivation, mental ability, and overall optimism. So mental health is instrumental in allowing students to accept negative feedback with a positive mindset. For example, receiving a low grade on a test or feedback on an essay. Students with poor mental health may become skeptical toward their own understanding on different perspectives or interpreting criticism. So ultimately, mental health is important not only for overall well-being, but in academic performance. Okay, effects of stress on executive functioning. So first of all, executive functioning is a set of mental skills that include working memory, flexible thinking, and self-control. And we use these skills every day to learn, work, and manage daily life. And any sort of difficulty with executive functioning can make it difficult to focus, follow directions, and handle emotions. Stress is essentially a physical and mental response to experiencing changes or challenges in life. So it involves a feeling of being overwhelmed or an ability to cope with emotional pressure. And reactions to stress are often associated with the fight or flight response. So stress is really a mental or physical response. And it evolved as a survival mechanism that allows people to react quickly to life-threatening situations. So a person will either fight the threat off or flee to safety. And unfortunately, our bodies can overreact to everyday stressors that are not life-threatening, such as stress from work, school, family, or social issues. And there is an optimal level of stress that may enhance ability, but too much stress can cause physical and mental health problems, which in turn directly affects academic performance, as I mentioned previously. Elevated stress levels among students may also result in changes in behavior, such as irritability, frustration, or even withdrawing. And major sources of stress for students often include poor time management, difficulty with organization, and changes in sleeping or eating habits. So if these sources of stress are not dealt with in a healthy way, they may lead to what researchers call a scarcity mindset, which will eventually lead to a scarcity mindset cycle. So we often assume that students who miss deadlines or show up to class late are just careless or inconsiderate. However, this may not be the case, and these students may be functioning under a scarcity mindset. So a scarcity mindset is the result of facing urgent or unmet needs, which may be in the form of not getting enough sleep or skipping meals. And as a result, a person will react in less disciplined ways. So when you're facing urgent unmet needs, it interrupts our thinking and creates this intense focus on that unmet need. And it essentially creates a higher cognitive load by constantly pulling away our attention to that unmet need. And this essentially exhausts the mind with constant trade-off decisions. So for example, students will often choose to stay up all night or get a very little amount of sleep to get an assignment done. And so these constant trade-off decisions will deplete mental reserves and create a cascade of effects leading to reduced self-control, lack of cognitive vigilance, and ultimately poor decision-making with narrow-minded thinking and convincing ourselves that we will have more time in the future. So to sum up, when we are stressed, which is mainly a result of poor time management or unmet needs, this will lead to effects on executive functioning, like decision-making and self-control, which in turn directly affects academic performance. Okay, so parent-child relationships. One of the most important theories in marriage and family therapy is the theory of attachment. So that focuses on the parent-child interactions and how that relationship manifests and develops throughout one's lifespan, as well as the importance that relationship has on your child's view of themselves and the world. And so this is called an internal working model, which is similar to the self-concept that Bailey mentioned previously. And everyone has it, and it continues to develop throughout one's life. And a very influential factor on a child's internal working model is that parent-child relationship. And most of the time, children who have the ability to regulate emotions and have a positive view of themselves and others have experienced some form of parental warmth, responsiveness, and closeness with their parental figure. So how can parents and families help and support their students' mental health in navigating away from stress or a scarcity mindset? Well, a great opportunity to bond and interact and thus support and safeguard a child is through family meals. Recent studies have shown that regular family meals are associated with a variety of positive outcomes that improve well-being, including a decreased risk of substance use or delinquency, heightened personal and social well-being, and most importantly, better academic performance. So family meals have shown to improve academic performance. Family meals open up the level of communication within the family and allows children and parents to reflect together on their daily activities, including school. And it ultimately creates an environment where your child feels safe and secure to discuss concerns that they may have. And this may also be a time to pay attention to mood levels or changes in behavior at home. And family meals essentially can make a huge difference on your child's life and their academic performance. Okay, parental monitoring. So obviously, there are going to be changes in the family and the parent-child relationship as your child grows up and goes through adolescence. So this is often a time when children tend to spend less time with family and more time with friends, and receive less supervision and monitoring from parents. However, studies do show that it is critical that youth remain connected with their families to receive guidance and support. Research shows that adolescents, even up until age 17, still require some form of supervision and parental monitoring. It's critical, especially as they go through difficult social, emotional, and cognitive challenges during this period of life. Research shows that significant relationships with caregivers, peers, and siblings either serve to protect them from engaging in problem behaviors and later issues such as substance use, as well as aiding in their development. Studies also show that parental monitoring is positively associated with academic achievement, specifically regarding self-determined motivation and academic self-efficacy, which in turn is positively associated with academic achievement. So although youth do need their own space and time as they grow older, parental monitoring is still critical throughout adolescence and is connected to academic achievement. Okay, so time management for students. Time management is essentially self-management, and it is important that children learn this early on, I think, especially before college. Essentially, you are managing your physical, psychological, and interpersonal behavior within the context of time. And effective time management allows students to complete more in less time because their attention is focused and they're not wasting time on distractions, which links back to what I mentioned earlier about the scarcity mindset cycle. So sleep. Lack of sleep compromises overall physical and psychological health and well-being. I'm sure everyone knows. The CDC says 13 to 18-year-olds should sleep around 8 to 10 hours per 24 hours. For meals, I'm sure everyone has also heard that 3 meals a day is the healthy recommendation. And so this is where self-management could be taught and learned before going away to college. And also, I wanted to note that water intake and staying hydrated is an important habit to maintain. So you should drink about half of how much you weigh in ounces. So if you weigh 150 pounds, you should drink about 75 ounces of water per day. Studying. So developing and learning good study habits is not just a matter of sitting down and reviewing material. It involves knowing what you need to study, when, and keeping track of assignments and tests. Good study habits don't typically come easily or naturally, and they're usually learned and developed throughout time. So this could be in the form of creating a calendar, having a weekly planner and daily checklists that include assignments and due dates. And also, it is important to consider location of studying. So do they study better in certain rooms in the house? Is it a quiet space with little distractions? And Bailey also mentioned briefly about brain breaks. So studies do show that students should take 5 to 15-minute breaks every hour or so, and take longer breaks. About 30 minutes every 2 to 4 hours. So this will allow for better decision-making, refocusing, and it essentially helps in retaining information. Okay, so most social activities have switched to online. I'm sure everyone knows about FaceTime and Instagram. And although it is very important for students to remain social and develop healthy interpersonal relationships during this time, it is also important to monitor that use, which my classmate Lawrence will talk more about later. So digital overuse does affect mental health, and it increases the risk for mental health issues such as depression, anxiety, difficulty focusing. And I think it's important to note that this upcoming generation, Gen Z, which is currently individuals ages 6 to 24 years old, are the most anxious and depressed generation yet. And a major factor is that use of social media and tech use. So monitoring tech use will be important for academic achievement. For physical activity, the CDC recommends about 1 hour per day for kids ages 6 to 17. So basically too much time spent in sedentary behavior, such as sitting or lying down, affects your physical and psychological health. And lastly, family time. So again, that parent-child relationship is so important, and having quality family time where there's open communication and a secure environment for your children is very important. Okay, so this is just a little activity that we have called the pie time chart activity. And if you could look at your day, and all of the hours of the day are slices of a pie. So 8 hours will be gone for sleep, 3 to 4 hours for eating, and 8 hours for work. So now you have this amount of time or hours in the day left. What do you want to do in these remaining hours? And so some questions to think about is like, looking at this, how many hours would you like to spend with self-care? And does it feel like you have enough time during the day? What activities do you wish you had more time to do? And which activities do you spend too much time doing? And these are questions that may also be beneficial for your students to think about. For example, how much time do they spend studying? And what activities do they spend too much time doing? Okay, and next we have Lawrence discussing technology use.
Okay. So hello, my name is Lawrence. I'm going to be talking about tech use. So this is going to be a lot of information. And I'm going to be going over different types of tech, media usage, what healthy media usage looks like, what healthy tech usage looks like. But I can imagine that a lot of people have a lot of questions or concerns regarding this, because this is something that is a lot more recent, that has become an issue for a lot of people, parents and educators alike. And it's totally normal, because as something that's kind of always been nipping at our heels, it's now kind of come at us full swing, and pretty much out of nowhere for a lot of people. So hopefully I can sort of assuage some of those concerns, but we're going to be going into breakout rooms. So it gives you guys a little opportunity to talk amongst yourselves, figure out if you guys have any concerns or questions that you guys may want to field to each other. And yeah, so we're going to take a little time to go into smaller groups for a little bit. Start of COVID, 300 million daily meeting participants. Discord, which is very popular among younger generations, has about 100 million monthly active users. Skype, which has been around for a while as a video chatting service, has been around for 300 million monthly active users. And then there's FaceTime, which if you have an Apple iOS device, it is a built-in feature. And console online communication. So if you have children who like to game, this is also another avenue of voice communication that you may not be aware that they actually have access to. So it's always a good thing to keep in mind. And there's also extraneous circumstances regarding those specific communication modalities. Okay, so the first one I want to talk about is Zoom. So Zoom, we're all here, we're all on Zoom. We have some familiarity with it. At least on an educational level, we have a fair amount of familiarity. So it's pretty accessible for everybody. Video function, chat function, screen sharing function, emoji reaction functions, breakout room. It's got a lot of things, a lot of built-in features, very handy, very simple, which is why it's kind of the go-to for a lot of educators, right? One that we may not be familiar with is called Discord. So Discord has been around for a few years, and I'm going to go ahead and take this time to put a little link for you guys in the chat box right there. So this link is going to take you to their informational page where they're going to have a drop-down menu specifically for parents and educators, and that will go over every little detail about Discord, safety behaviors on Discord, what you can go over. Almost, I would say most of the time, if you ask anyone like children, high school, even college and lower, if they use Discord, you're probably going to get an answer that's yes, yeah, almost certainly. It's becoming increasingly popular with younger generations. Super interactive, right? You can create your little profiles you can see there. There's chat room functions. There's picture sharing, file sharing, GIF sharing, media sharing. There's voice channels, there's video channels. And a really good thing about Discord is that you can make privatized groups. So you can set them up to be invite only. So you don't have to worry about it, but they can interact with strangers too. And that's another thing to be very mindful of going forward, right? And if you check that infographic page that I linked in the chat, it'll tell you all about that, right? And then the next one I want to talk about. So Skype's been around for a long time. If you have a Windows OS device, it comes pre-installed now. If you go into your little Windows Start search bar and type in Skype, it'll probably be installed somewhere if you haven't actually deleted it. A lot of features on Skype. It's been around for decades at this point. Same thing as the other ones. Its main primary focus is as a video chatting option. And it's integrated into your Windows account as well. So if you have a Microsoft account, most likely you have a Skype account as well, because they are owned by Microsoft, right? And then the next one I want to talk about, FaceTime. If you have an Apple device, FaceTime is super popular. It's basically just taking a video call, gives you that face-to-face action at your fingertips. A lot of options there. Group meetings. You can use this little emoji thing that they newly implemented, I think, a few months back, where it replaces your face with an emoji, and it simulates your facial movements and your mouth movements. It's a fun thing. It's a cute little thing you can do. A lot of effects, but it works like any other call, right? So, especially if you're using it on a phone or a tablet, always be mindful of your surroundings, right? Because this is a very public option for you to take. It's not like this, where you're within your own home and setting. This can be accessed anywhere you want. So always be mindful of your surroundings when using FaceTime, right? For sure. And then we get to one that you're probably not too familiar with, consoles. If you didn't know, if your child owns an Xbox of any kind or a PlayStation of any kind, they have the option to opt in to an online service. There's different payment plans going from 1 month to 3 months to 1 year. So please be mindful of that. If they have recurring payments on your card, and you see it from Sony or Microsoft, and they're about $60, most likely, and you get it year after year, it's gonna be this. It is gonna be this. And these, so there's no video chatting on these. First and foremost, I want to articulate that there's no video chatting, but there is voice chatting. That is what this function is for. It is for online communication and playing games over the internet. That is what these things do for you. You have to pay for that service. It's like paying for internet, but with your console. Always be mindful of giving same safety rules apply. Don't give out personal information. Be very wary of the kinds of people you play games with online. Don't give any like types of identifiers like where you live or general vicinity or what you do, especially with people you don't know online, because there's a giant breadth of people, right? So yeah, the last one was Xbox. This was PlayStation. Same rules apply. Same thing for both, right? The communication aspect works exactly the same, and same thing with the recurring payment. It works exactly the same. So please be mindful if you are getting those recurring costs. Ask your child if they accidentally may have set you up for that, because they could without knowing, right? All it takes is a little check mark in a box. Okay. So familiarity and safety. So familiarity with the technology your child is using is just as important as them knowing what they're using, right? Knowledge is power, right? So knowing what your child is using is huge. It makes it for one thing, it helps to alleviate the worries that you may have regarding the unknown factors about tech use and media use. And it gives you more power over what you want to look at, right? And what to look out for in these apps, right? So physical devices, phones, tablets, video game consoles, computers, parental controls in all technology, anything that connects over the internet or has wireless communication has parental controls built in. Phones have it, tablets have it, consoles also have it, computers have it. Especially for things like consoles and Apple devices, right? You have your Apple ID, and then consoles, you have to have another type of ID to sign in. If you really want to monitor that, then and control, their spending, because you don't just want to give them your credit card and have them go wild. You should be the one to set that up, right? You should be the one to set up your account or their account for them, so that you have that stronger degree of control over, well, your money, right? Social media. So I'm going to touch on this because it's important to at least know which are kind of the big players in social media at this current moment in time. Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Snapchat, Twitter. Those are the 5 really, really big ones, right? Facebook has been long-standing and shows no signs of slowing down. Instagram, got to be really careful about this one, right? Because you're sharing photos, right? And there's also location sharing feature when you post photos, if you have that turned on. So got to be really careful about that. TikTok, it's like Instagram, but strictly for video formats, right? And then Snapchat, got to be even more careful with this one, because when you send those photos, they're gone, right? As soon as you tap to open it, they're gone. And then Twitter is a little bit different. So Twitter is more for to send out your thoughts, just in a text format. So for all like the world to see, which isn't as harmful as you may think, but in a more professional capacity, or as they get older, you really want them to be careful about what they're saying online, right? And a common phrase is tweets are forever, right? They'll stay there unless they do something about it, and you don't want anybody doing a deep dive and potentially digging up something, and on any of these, right, that they may regret when they get older, right? So definitely be careful. And the next thing I want to talk about is just media in general. So media consumption across the board has increased. There's literally no exception to this rule, believe it or not, since COVID. The most used streaming services are Netflix, which with an increase of 80%, Amazon with an increase of 67%, Hulu at 57%, Disney at 52%, HBO Max at 35%, and Peacock at 22%. And the only reason the last couple are lower is because they're actually just newer. If they were in full swing at the time of COVID, they would have been just as high. So those increases are not small by any means. So a few habits. Adults spend nearly 6.5 hours a day watching TV and online video, and that's 45 hours a week. Percentage-wise, that's almost a fourth of your week you spend consuming media. 1 hour and 11 minutes per day watching streaming services, double what it was before the pandemic. 12 million customers signed up to new services like Netflix, Amazon Prime, and Disney Plus. Viewing figures for video streaming services are up 71%. That's huge from 2019. That's the difference between 1 million and about 250,000. That's massive. So the most popular streaming sites right now that we need to be mindful of: Amazon Prime, Hulu, HBO Max, Netflix, Peacock, Disney Plus. Those have, shows that are just there for your viewing pleasure. Crunchyroll, if your child is invested into Japanese animation, that is going to be the big one. And all of these streaming services incur a fee. They have a monthly plan or a yearly plan. So again, make sure you have that degree of control when it comes to those accounts, because you're the one probably paying for it, right? Twitch is a bit of a new one, and YouTube by extension. These are live streaming services, so they give a platform for people who their job is to play games pretty much for a wide audience of people. Twitch alone has 3 million daily viewers across their entire platform. Some of these streamers garner tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of viewers per stream. And it's like watching YouTube videos of people playing games, but live, which is a pretty big deal. And there's also a chat function. You can subscribe to these streamers for different tiers at $5, $10, and $25 per month to gain access to things like ad-free viewing and these emotes that they can use in the chat room that are unique to the streamer. So there are paid services, which are, again, you got to be careful about. So that is twitch.tv that would be incurring that cost. And a lot of younger generations are really, really invested in Twitch. Okay, next one. So the question that we really want to, hear about: how much is too much in regards to video gaming? Big one. So here are a couple signs that video gaming may be a problem. So before I get into this, I do want to say that a lot of these are on a case-by-case basis, right? There are stipulations in place that you should consider before you make like a hard judgment, like they're playing too much, like they're always playing too much. And I'm going to go over a few of those. So, heavy preoccupation with gaming, declining or refusing outings due to gaming, loss of interest in activities they used to enjoy, downplaying the amount of gaming. And I'm talking about if they're playing 8 hours a day and they still say it's not a lot. That'd be downplaying, because that's a third of their day out of the window, right? Loss of relationship, educational, or career opportunities, lack of control or withdrawal symptoms related to gaming, and continuing to game despite it causing social problems. So what are the extenuating circumstances? Because these sound pretty serious. I kind of liken it to a child with a new toy. When a child gets a brand new toy, the first thing they want to do is play with it all day. They become obsessed with playing with the new toy. Same thing applies to gaming. When people get new games, they just want to focus on it. They're invested. They want to devote that time to really sink their teeth into this new thing. And maybe it'll be a while, right? Like a few hours or a long amount of hours. That kind of behavior is normal. It becomes a problem when that behavior is repeated over like a long extended period of time. And then all these other things follow, right? Like declining or refusing outings due to gaming, loss of relationships, educational or career opportunities due to gaming, right? Withdrawal symptoms, especially related to gaming, heavy preoccupation. So those things in particular are things that may follow it, but of course, case by case basis. So of course, be sure to talk with your child and monitor, especially how much consumption that they're partaking in. Right. And benefits. So those are some worries that we might have. Benefits. So gaming has a substantial amount of benefits that we often overlook. So here are a couple. It's readily available entertainment, right? Especially in a pandemic, it's like right there. Requires no effort to get to. All you need to do is flip a switch. You're in. A sense of community without the need for being physically present. So I mentioned earlier, things like Discord is actually really big with gamers and younger generations. And there are gaming servers and gaming communities that get together and play games together. And it gives a sense of community without that need for being physically present with other people. It helps to manage feelings of isolation and loneliness, which are especially common during COVID. It allows them to actually hang out with each other in a virtual setting, which is huge right now because we can't do it physically. It's a helpful medium to teach skills such as working as a team and polite communication, right? So if you monitor the verbal communication that your child may be making while playing games or while on media, it could be something to work on. Readily accessible and effective coping skill. And it also helps with the development of fine motor skills. So hand-eye coordination is a really big one. There have been multiple studies on motor skills and gaming and reaction time, actually. And the studies have shown that people who are actually engaged in gaming across pretty much all ages, they showed higher reaction times, so quicker reaction times across the board. They were able to, their visual feedback is a lot better than most people's. They can take in more visual feedback. And their motor skills in general, so using their hands, is a lot finer than other people's. So technology use such as video chatting and calling allow for effective and consistent communication that would otherwise be difficult. And we're on an island, right? So if we have family back on the mainland or anywhere else, we can't really take that leisure to go fly over. So even post-pandemic, this still stays as a great way to keep in touch. And gaming can be used to bring families closer together. So what do I mean by that? So I know that there may be concerns related to things like limiting the use and how to control the use. Setting up something called a token economy, right? Rewarding their better behavior by giving them more playtime, or maybe the more good things they do, they build up points, which they can use towards getting that next new game or that another new game console. Setting up things like that helps encourage better behavior, and it puts them into a more habitual pattern of repeating that better behavior over time. Stronger one-to-one relationships and better relative understanding and more points of bonding. These all have to do with immersing yourself as a parent into your child's world, right? Because for all the want that we try to get a understanding just looking at descriptions and words on the internet, one of the best ways is delving into it yourself. And delving into it yourself offers you, for one thing, a unique perspective and better understanding as to, hey, why is this so fun? Why is my child so into this game, right? And another thing is, maybe you like it, right? Maybe you'll end up really liking it. And if that's the case, all the better for you to actually play with your child, because that kind of acts as a point of family bonding. It's like family game night, but not board games or physical games, but online. Serves the same exact purpose. And again, you can also practice, right? Working as a team, polite communication. There's a lot of pertinent skills that we can practice during that time. Right.
Yeah, thank you, Law. And I wanted to, I compiled, and there were only a couple questions. So I'm wondering, I'm sure you have more after listening to Lawrence. But if you feel so inclined to unmute and ask, but I do have two questions here for you. How do you protect children and teens on the internet, Law?
Right. So this was a question, it's a lot. So it's a multifaceted approach between practicing online and offline safety, because we think that privacy and safety are restricted to online presence. It's not, right? A lot of it has to do with your offline presence as well, and what safety measures you can take beyond the screen here. So I talked about parental controls, right? Your devices all have listed parental controls that you can go out of your way to enact on your child's device. Apple, Microsoft, all of these big tech companies have them pre-installed. You just need to go and look at it. So, for example, let's say your child has an iPhone and you don't know how to activate the parental controls. One thing you could do is just do a quick Google search. There are infographics on their websites that'll teach you step by step, this is what you need to do to activate parental controls. Another thing is, I mean, of course, the biggest factor and one that's always preached is to talk to your child about internet safety, right? And there's tons of resources online that will list what proper internet safety looks like. But to give a few examples here, definitely don't give up personal information unless it is with close friends that they know in person here. When talking to strangers, because when it's gaming, that's really highly unavoidable. So when talking with strangers, right, always make sure, well, for one thing, that they're not giving information like age, for one thing, even state of residence you don't want to give out, or country either, really. You want them to remain as anonymous as humanly possible. And if that's the case, a good way is children usually have a username set up that isn't identifiable in any way. So have them refer to themselves by that username. Really, really handy trick, right? Also, another thing is if they are confronted with somebody who says that they know who they are, a trick that works both offline and online is setting up a code phrase. And this is a code phrase that you as a parent would only give to people who you trust, right? And you want to make sure that this code phrase is very unique, right? So something like, I don't know, my favorite silver spoon has this engraved on it, right? Something specific, something unique, something that would be very difficult to hone in on. And if your child is confronted with somebody who says, I know you, the first thing they should ask is, what's the code phrase, right? If the other person doesn't know it, well, clearly they're not a trusted person, right? So that's like a really handy one to have in your pocket, for sure.
Very nice, Law. And as we continue here, the other question was, how does tech use affect developing emotions such as empathy?
Right. So this one's a bit more difficult. When it comes to developing emotions, so not just empathy, right? But everything else, like developing a good sense of camaraderie, teamwork, understanding, empathy, sympathy, all of those intricate emotions, those higher, more complicated emotions. Online presence offers a unique perspective that I think in person as well, but for online, I think the same thing applies, right? Development of those skills still apply so long as they're still getting that social interaction, right? Just because we've gone from in person to online doesn't mean we've somehow immediately lost all of our contacts. We have all the friends haven't gone anywhere. They haven't disappeared. We've just switched our medium from in person to online. And the translation of medium doesn't heavily affect anything too much, but you want to make sure that they're still, at the very least, being sociable online with their friends, right? Because they probably still talk to their friends online. Maybe it's Zoom, maybe it's Discord, maybe it's Skype, who knows? But from whatever medium they are, they're still going to talk about their problems. They're still going to share about things they're going through. Especially now, right? They may be having really big, problems with feeling alone, feeling stressed, frustrated, especially getting acclimated to this and really wanting to go back outside, right? Like, man, I really wish we could hang out like we used to. That's huge. And in having those conversations with their peers, they develop that empathy, that sympathy, those senses of camaraderie, of understanding other people. So the development of those skills hasn't gone anywhere. It's only switched mediums.
Bullying is really a symptom oftentimes of things that are deeper, right? So I do want to mention that oftentimes there are people who are hurting or modeled behavior that they've learned around aggressiveness and all that. So a much larger conversation that I wish we had more than, the time we have to go. But I do want to turn it over to Tanye for, and I'm going to share my screen.
Okay, so I know we're a little off schedule, so I'll try to make it pretty quick. But I wanted to share about your graduating teens. So, you might not be going through this now, but it's definitely with your younger kids something to remember in the future. So I work with college students, like Dr. Hawkins mentioned. So these are a lot of the recurring stressors that I hear from my clients. And they're going through a lot. They're definitely all going through a lot right now. So I just wanted to propose this question about how college was for you, and maybe not even going to college, just worrying about your future and how difficult that was for you and how stressful it was for you. Now try and add COVID to that, because that's what your child's dealing with currently. And these are some of the stressors, just some. There's definitely a lot more that your child may be going through during this process. Some may include, relationships with a significant other, friendships as well, applying for schools, health concerns, financial concerns, career decisions, admissions to school, feelings of isolation, studying, homework, maybe working a part-time job as well with school, family problems, family relationships, chores, moving, all of that. They're all dealing with everything all at once. So it's definitely a lot on their plate. I wanted to go further into applying for schools and how stressful it is. But it also should be a fun and exciting experience that they're going through. Right now with COVID, they're experiencing a lot of changes and a lot of new losses, such as moving away. It has become a lot more difficult. There's new struggles and roadblocks that are happening with that. They might not be able to have that opportunity to move away now. They might be concerned about financial situations, health situations. So definitely a big change. It's also with that, it's hard to meet new classmates or make friends. This was already a difficulty with college in general, or moving away, or any adult changes. But right now, especially with the minimal and lessened face-to-face interactions, it's extremely hard to make these relationships. So that causes huge feelings of isolation. Another loss would be campus tours. Something super enjoyable, something to look forward to, but many have turned into online campus tours, and it's also become very minimal. Even losing out on extracurricular activities that were normal before COVID, they're missing out on those experiences. Scholarship opportunities, we've seen with COVID happening, the change in sports, there wasn't as many opportunities to participate, so scholarships were affected. Even with career success, fields are changing. Fields before COVID that were doing super well and successful, there may not be a need for those fields anymore, or other fields are doing better. So it's definitely a change and adjustment that they have to make with their goals in the future. And then how to support them with this. So you really need to be supportive with their decision. You need to give them that independency, making these decisions, whether they want to go to school or not, take a semester or two off, go to an online school, community college, whatever they decide, they need your support at that time. Like I said, they are experiencing a lot of feelings of loss. So it's important to be able to validate and empathize and understand what they're going through. And then with this process, you need to make sure to help them, but also not be too controlling, because they're also, evolving into adults. So they need that independency, but they also still need your support. It's important too with admissions to guide them through it. It's something unfamiliar and something they're not too sure of how to do. So they do need your help with that, and it'll really give them that motivation and make them excited about the process. And then working together to find campus resources, any type of extracurricular activities they can do, or other helpful opportunities. They may need your help in finding these things and knowing those things are there because they are available. And then getting into workloads and studying, also a big part of college, a big stressor. Right now with the situation of COVID, professors are still working hard to figure out what works. They're still trying to adjust to everything. So curriculum changes are happening. But your child as well is having difficulty adjusting with the changes to online classes. It is something that's super difficult for a lot of individuals to adjust to, because learning that way is new. So they need help with that. Isolation as well. It's harder to reach out to their classmates, to have that social interaction. It's harder to reach out to their professors sometimes. And changes in environment, where they study, where they're working. Sometimes for individuals who need that quiet time to study, they would go to, cafes or libraries. But because with COVID, it's harder to access these things and access these environments. So they have to make changes to that as well. So how to support them with this? Really, really important, maintain your own anxiety. Your child's dealing with not only their own anxieties from school and everything, but they also feel your anxieties. You're probably going through a lot financially, your job, everything, all this kind of stress, but they also feel that as well. They're also feeling it from their professors. So it's important to model calmness. If, there are adults or turning into adults, but they still look up to you. They still learn a lot from you. So if you can model this calmness, it'll help them adjust with their anxiety and see how they can deal with it. Staying in touch often, also super important. They still need your support. They still need to know that you're still there for them and that you care. When you do talk to them, it would help a lot to kind of avoid lecturing. Really focus on asking how they feel, what's changing, notice their sleeping habits, their eating habits, any types of those changes. Talk about self-care as well. Make sure they know how important self-care is if they're doing stuff to help themselves. And then you can also model that, because I really feel like, and I want to emphasize this, GPA is definitely not worth the expense of your child's mental well-being. And then helping them to create a schedule. You can set an example too by manage your planning and organization at home. It'll really help them to figure out how they can manage their whatever's on their plate too. You can also help them set up an effective studying space. This way, it'll help them focus and be more motivated when they are learning online and studying at home. And then, okay, so I wanted to get into mental health because it is super important at this age. You know, working with college students right now, we've seen a really, really huge spike in mental health crises and suicide rates. And it's really, really important that we recognize this and how COVID's really affecting it. So some facts about mental health. Half of all mental health conditions start by 14 years of age, but most cases are undetected and untreated. In 2019, it was estimated that 1 in 7 adolescents experience mental health conditions. Of course, these rates are spiking because of COVID. Teenage suicide rates have been rising within the last decade. Teen suicide rates have increased by 57%. And then suicide is also the second leading cause of death for ages 10 to 24. So therapy and mental health needs to be normalized, especially by you. They look up to you, they talk to you. If you can normalize it for them, you know, they'll feel comfortable talking to you about how they feel. They'll be able to recognize it more. Taking notes of cues, smallest cues, you know, laziness. You might view it and deem it as laziness, but you know, there's always an underlying issue. Communication, of course. Communicate, just talk about, normalize communication. Just talk about what's going on, how you feel, what's happening around you. Practice mindfulness or relaxation exercises together. We do this in therapy with all of our clients, and it definitely helps with de-stressing them. So if this is a practice you can start doing together, you can normalize it for them and they can incorporate it into a normal schedule. And then with parent and teen relationships, so during this time, it's having a strong relationship with your child, you know, it really helps them to overcome any other stressors that they're dealing with. So I wanted to get into autonomy with supervision. So giving them that independence, but also monitoring it, because, you know, your child doesn't turn into an adult overnight. It doesn't just happen. So as your child ages, many changes are happening and decisions are being made independently, but it's important to respect their process, be able to provide support and guidance when needed and when asked. And learning is a part of growing up. And it's also important to have individual and shared spaces so they do feel like they have a space of their own, but also feel still a part of the family and have that support. Communication, but do not pry. So it's vital to communicate so you know how they're feeling, what challenges they're going through, being open to new and uncomfortable conversations. So this too also reflects in, like, adding on to what Law was talking about with social media and all that stuff. If you show that you're open to uncomfortable situations and handle it very well, they'll be able to share it with you, stuff that's private, and be open about it. Also, make sure when you are communicating with them, you know, allow them time to respond to you. Like when you send them a text, give them some time. They might not have time to always get back to you or call you back because college is very busy. And then express your worries and concerns, but you also do not need to know every single detail about what they're doing. And then support. So support comes in all different forms. After communicating with your child as to how you can help them, please do it. Please follow through. Sending them positive texts, making sure they have tools needed for success, and listening without forcing advice. So sometimes they just need you to be there so they can vent and talk. Empathy and validation over advice. And then, so I just wanted to make sure that you do recognize there are a lot of programs and resources available to help your child on campuses, online still too. so many financial counseling, tutoring, so many resources available. Even if they're not going to college, there's a lot of community resources that could help ease any type of stress they're going through. And that's it. That's all I have.
All right. Thank you all, my fabulous students. And I did have one last thing before I turn it back over to Sister Malia. We did want to know, we wanted to get some feedback on how you experienced this workshop and how, what kinds of takeaways you might have. So I'm just going to share my screen and do one last word cloud, if you will, and let us know, right? So same thing you did before, and just give us one word that you're leaving this event with. We'd love to know. And you can enter as many one words as you'd like. So you can enter one word and then enter another if you want, but we would love to get some feedback. Mm-hmm. Also see some chat coming in as well. And once again, we thank you so much. We might not be able to address everything in the chat, but we appreciate it all. Wonderful. Thank you so much for all these words coming in. Yeah, we're so glad to be able to provide this. Great. All right. Well, feel free to continue putting those words in, but I'm so glad that this is how you experienced this time we had together and that we were able to share together. I'm going to pass it over to Sister Malia.
Mahalo, Blendine, Bailey, Lawrence, Shannon, and Tanye. It was just a wonderful presentation, so full of so many suggestions, so many realities, and so many things that we can think of and pass on to other people. And so I'd like to introduce Ernestine Yamamoto for our closing benediction. Thank you.
Yes, let me also offer my thank yous to the Chaminade team. That was really informative, a lot of information to digest. So as we do that, in closing, let me offer a loving kindness meditation. So take a few moments and just take a breath. And if you'd like to shut your eyes, you can do that. Just breathing in and breathing out. And relax into this moment. Despite the uncertainty of these times with COVID and all that has happened this past year and into this year, may you be safe. May you be sheltered and protected. May you feel peaceful and at ease. May you be gentle and kind to yourself and to others. And when in moments of fear, anger, or upset, may you remember to come back to your breath. And just as you wish this for yourself and for those whom you love, may you extend these wishes to all beings, known and unknown, those with whom you have difficulties, and those with whom you share this beautiful earth.
Thank you, Ernestine.
Thank you all thank you, Ernestine, for the wonderful prayer, and everybody for joining us today. Please keep in mind and share the good news of Chaminade's Masters of Science Counseling Psychology program, marriage and family therapy especially. And so I wish you all the best, and take care. Aloha. Mahalo. Thank you.